OJ Simpson is still the talk of the country after news came out yesterday that he died at the age of 76 of prostate cancer. It was announced by his family. This was just a couple of months ago on February 11th when OJ Simpson posted this video on Twitter. I'm going to play this for you. And it, of course, he was, after he got out of prison in Nevada, he was quite prolific on Twitter, always posting various videos, commenting on all sorts of stories. And so here was the last video post.
Hey, X-World, it's me, yours truly. Boy, what a beautiful day it is here in Las Vegas. Even though the game is indoors, it wouldn't have mattered, but still, it's nice to have a beautiful day like this. Hey, let me take a moment to say thank you to all the people who've reached out to me. My health is good. I mean, obviously I'm dealing with some issues, but hey, I think I'm just about over it, and I'll be back on that golf course, hopefully in a couple of weeks. But it was very nice hearing from you and hearing those good, positive words. Thank you. Now, as far as the game goes, obviously, my prediction.
That was February 11th. 2 months later, OJ Simpson was dead, dying of prostate cancer. All sort of stories have been done. Folks talking about the recollections of OJ. This New York Times article I found to be quite interesting. This is what it says. OJ was an earthquake. We're still living with his aftershocks. He tried to shed his blackness, but his all-consuming murder trial put the historically lurid American psyche on full display. Carl Douglas served on the legal dream team during that murder trial for OJ Simpson. He joins us right now. Carl, first of all, glad to have you. I know a lot of folks been trying to get your perspective, your thoughts on OJ. Before I ask a series of questions, when was the last time you talked or saw OJ?
Roland, first, thank you so much for having me on your show, Myth. I really appreciate it. The last time that I spoke to OJ was probably the day after the verdict in 1995. The last time that I saw him was in April of 2005. That was during Johnny Cochran's funeral here in Los Angeles. Reverend Al Sharpton was giving the eulogy, and he first asked the audience. 5,000 people filled the audience. It was so crowded, Oprah Winfrey was turned away at the front door. But he first looked around and said, how many people have ever worked with Johnny L. Cochran? And I stood up, and many others who worked with him stood up as well. Then he asked, how many people here today had ever been represented by Johnny L. Cochran? And I turned to my right, and I saw Michael Jackson stand up. And one row back, and maybe 4 or 5 seats away, I saw OJ stand up as well. That sight of seeing Michael Jackson and OJ Simpson there together at that same place is a vision that I'll probably take with me to my grave, brother.
When you look at how even today there is still such a visceral reaction when just the mention of the name OJ Simpson. I have seen memes, I've seen posts, I've seen folks reliving the trial, reposting items, talking about how it was wrong. Jurors have been interviewed on different networks. Several of them said, look, we got it right. What was it, from your perspective, what was it about this case that was unlike any other in American history?
Because it was a perfect storm, Roland, of a whodunit. And layered on that was race. And layered on that was celebrity. And layered on that was domestic violence. And layered on that was entertainment in Los Angeles. Some would say the media capital of the world. This was before X, Facebook, or Instagram. The only game in town at that time was the O.J. Simpson trial. And so it really held the nation transfixed. When the verdict was rendered on October the 3rd of 1995, there were as many as 150 million people, more than 1/3 of the entire nation of this great nation of ours were tuned in to watch that verdict. You hear about perhaps 14, 15, 19 million people watching the women's basketball game. But when you think about 150 million, 10 times that number of people watching one event, it really tells you the impact it has had on American history and American culture. Sir, people, white, black, young, and old, always will want to have a conversation with me about the OJ Simpson trial whenever I deign to bring it up.
I mean, it really, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it checked every single box. I mean, you had, athlete, rich guy, he black, the ex-wife was white, Ron Goldman. You had, I mean, it was everything all just converging at one time. And it really was about drawing a line in the sand. Folk was straight up in offices around the country picking sides. And it was an absolute black-white issue. And what was interesting about that is because you also had this black man who did everything he could to run away from black people and who openly talked about it. So that's also what was fascinating. And then you got racist Mark Furman, you got the N-word, I can't think what this trial didn't have.
Sure, man. But it also talks about the resiliency and how great black people are. Because OJ was known for saying, I'm not white, I'm not black, I'm OJ. Yet and still, when he got arrested, when he got in trouble,
his black ass was black.
He was embraced by the black community. He was one of us again now. And so the response at the verdict wasn't anything about OJ per se, but finally, once in this country, the system seemed to work in favor of a black man, and that was what we were rejoicing viscerally.
And that, Mark Lamont Hill actually tweeted that, and a lot of people got upset with his tweet when he talked about that, where he said that the justice system worked the way it was supposed to work because the state did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And people got upset with him, and he said, I'm not saying OJ wasn't guilty. He said, I'm not saying he was guilty. He said the onus on the prosecution is to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. And he said, and the reality is the doubt was there.
And it's not, the juror's question, Roland, is not whether he is guilty or innocent. That's not the test. The test is whether the government has met its burden of proving him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I can tell you this, Roland, there's a different burden in civil courts. They only have to prove that there's a preponderance of the evidence, more likely to be true than not true, 50.001%. And I dare say, if I were on that jury in Santa Monica for the civil verdict, I understand how they would rule that there's 50.1% proof against OJ Simpson civilly, but I also embrace and understand why this jury felt that the prosecution had failed in their burden of proving him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
For you, being a part of this legal defense team, many call the Dream Team, what was it like for you being in the midst of it, seeing the stories? Jury was sequestered, but seeing the stories and hearing everything was being talked about, hearing how everybody was being talked about. Then, of course, you had, we've heard these battles between Shapiro and Cochran and who was in charge. And it was like, okay, we got the white lawyers over here and the black lawyers over here. Then you had the F. Lee Bailey who was like, I'm gonna be with the black lawyers. And so you had a racial dynamic in the country of the trial. You had a racial dynamic on the prosecution side and a racial dynamic on the defense side.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, Roland, because rarely in life do you have a chance to step back and say, this is going to be important. And I fortunately had that wisdom moment when I was there in the trial. I was 40 years old, man, working with some of the greatest legal minds in America. F. Lee Bailey was my personal hero. Johnny Cochran, I thought, was the greatest lawyer in the world at that moment in time. Alan Dershowitz was a legal titan in the appellate world. So I can remember times sitting back on Saturday afternoons and just taking it all in, because we would all meet and talk about the past week and the prior week. And some of the greatest legal minds coming together, talking about the same issues, was like finishing school, graduate school for me, who was a 15-year lawyer then in 1995.
Have you, because of your involvement with this, do you have folk today who are still mad and pissed off at you?
I don't know if it's because I'm a younger brother or what it is, but I have never had a negative word said to me in my face. In fact, ironically, Mark Furman wrote in his book, I never read it, but I was told, it says, if the entire Dream Team had performed like Carl Douglas, the case would not have turned into a circus. People may have all of these extraordinary views and opinions, but I can say I have never in my face been confronted with a problem. And I am one of the few people, Roland, on behalf of the defense, who will go on TV and talk about the case and defend the verdict. My community embraces me. I am welcomed. I am uplifted. And I continue to raise and uplift the memory and the legacy of my man, my friend and mentor, Johnny L. Cochran Jr., who died in 2005, because I know if he were alive, he would be at my place talking about his success in that case 100%.
I'm gonna go to some questions from the panel after this question, but I gotta ask you this here. We've all seen that video of the verdict being read and the look on Kardashian's face, and when that happens, and then y'all retreat to a room. What was that like? I mean, and do you believe that he was shocked by the verdict? Because again, everybody makes these assumptions that he clearly thought that OJ was gonna be found guilty, and was stunned when the jury came back.
I was in the second row inside the well. My back was to he and F. Lee Bailey, so I didn't see that look on his face. Though I know what you're describing because they mentioned to me as well. We all went back to the back and celebrated. High fives, hugging, happy, joyous. There was not a hint or an indication, even from Bob Shapiro, that he was going to go that night and turn his back on the entire defense team. So I'm not a mind reader. I understand the question, but I have no insight whatsoever into what was going on in his mind at that moment. But I do know when we were all together, we were all celebrating after that day.
When you say what Shapiro did, for folks who don't know, I think he did an interview with Barbara Walters.
He did, yes. And he had an interview with them the night before, that night. And he said that the defense team had played the race card and had dealt from the bottom of the deck. That was offensive because the whole concept of using race as a defense ploy was a concept that he developed before Johnny Cochran was ever a lawyer on the case. So the hypocrisy of that statement was clear to all of us. We were at OJ's house partying the night of the verdict. I remember watching it on the TV screen when he was talking to Barbara Walters.
And y'all were like, the hell is he doing?
And more. OJ was very vocal, man. Okay? And very vocal. He was expressing anger and surprise, and he was talking, and he had this console that had 3 or 4 different TV screens on going at the same time, each one on a different news station. And he would be pacing around and yelling and talking and doing all kind of, but then we all stopped to listen to him about getting the interview.
Wow. Let's go. Matt, you're first.
Well, let me first geek out a little bit and say it is an honor to just be on the screen with you, Mr. Douglas. God willing, I have just a fraction of the legacy as a lawyer that you have, and I'm able to be a part of a team as impactful as yours. So let me give you your flowers first. And I don't want you to break privilege, but I'd love to know the answer to this question. So one thing I find as a black lawyer is a lot of times black clients just feel a kinship with me that they may not feel with other people on the team. I know we've talked about some of the racial issues, but what was your feeling, if you can speak to that, about how OJ aligned with the differing views in the room in terms of strategy, and just what role race played even inside the team and in terms of how the client was responding to various strategies and going forward, if you can speak to that?
It was amazing, brother, because before that, OJ chose not to see race in his life. He melded well between all racial groups and was probably very comfortable in the white world of Brentwood. At the same time, though, he was a brother from Hunters Point in San Francisco. The brother could talk trash, play bid whist, roll some dice, and be on that level as well. And he became more understanding of the significance of race in the criminal justice system as the case evolved over the course of the many months and years. And it's unique in Los Angeles because no one could understand the OJ Simpson verdict without understanding the racial dynamics which were then present in Los Angeles in that time and in that place. And I dare say, as a lawyer there for 44 years, man, if anyone tries a case in Los Angeles and ignores the object or the subject of race, they do so to their own peril. I consider race in choosing experts and figuring out what witnesses to call and when, because it is, regrettably, an important factor in everything that we do as lawyers.
Kelly.
Thank you.
I echo Matt's sentiments in being on the same screen as you, sir. It is an honor. The law nerd in me is also geeking out, so I will reel it back a little bit. My question to you isn't necessarily regarding legal strategy so much as it is, and I think it's fair to say your attenuated relationship with OJ Simpson since the trial, based off of what you just said, the last time you saw him, the last time you spoke with him. Has your lens in regards to who OJ is, in regards to how the case played out, has that been clouded? Has that been cleared up? Has it shifted at all since the verdict? And if so, why?
It's funny because my career took off after the verdict. I remember most of what I did before that time was as a civil rights lawyer. And I would appear in civil court and say my name and who I worked for, and the entire courtroom would go silent to hear what the lawyer from Johnny Cochran's office would say. And that was a tremendously powerful residue for my career. I left his office within years of the verdict, opening up my own firm. And the connection that I had with that case is in Los Angeles, very uplifting, very powerful. I don't advertise because I really don't have to. My work works for me. But it is the value of my involvement in that case that has only uplifted me and my career for the 30 years since then. I used to, in the beginning, not want to embrace my involvement until I realized when a wise person told me it's important that you are known for something. That which is considered the trial of the century, and we won. And as a trial lawyer, winning the biggest case in your career is something that we all would embrace and want to be a part of. As any lawyer who's a trial lawyer can tell you, when the game is on the line, when the clock is running down, I want the ball in my hand so that I can be the one to make the decisions and to do that thing that is best for my client. And that's just a special part of a personality of a trial lawyer, I think.
Michael.
All right, Attorney Douglas, thanks for coming on today. I remember watching the trial live on CNN. This is even before MSNBC existed, so I watched it basically every day. The question I had for you is I was watching some analysis from Attorney Roland Martin CNN, and she was talking about Mark Furman and Mark Furman allegations of him using the N-word and him perjuring himself on the witness stand during that trial. And I think a lot of people may have forgotten about that, may not even know who Mark Furman is. Can you talk about that for a minute? And just a quick follow-up question, if I may. I just wanted to know, what do you think was the biggest piece of evidence or lack of piece of evidence that got O.J. Simpson the acquittal?
Well, Mark Furman was a central detective who found a glove at the Rockingham location. He had, years before, petitioned the city of Los Angeles to allow him to retire with benefits because he harbored such virulent, racist, violent attitudes against black and brown prisoners and suspects that he thought he was a danger to himself and to others. He hated them so much that they would beat him, and he relished that kind of violence. So in Los Angeles, there is such distrust at that moment between the police and the African-American community. You could probably stop anyone on the streets of Los Angeles who was black at random, and they could tell you a story of themselves, their friend, or their family member being treated unfairly by the LAPD. That distrust is something that we as the defense fed into. And when you had a central detective who took the Fifth Amendment in a murder case, that was clearly a bright line. But the seminal piece of evidence, I say, that really turned the tide was that glove demonstration that we all remember when the murder glove didn't fit on the hand of the accused murderer. That was a visual sign that seared into the memory of the jurors, irrespective that there were 30 days of mind-numbing DNA evidence, irrespective that there were 3 weeks spent on the domestic relationships and the problems that they had in their past marriage. When there was a dramatic, in-your-face, feet-away demonstration and the murder glove did not fit the hand of the murderer, that, I think, was the moment when we all thought that a conviction was going to be impossible and that a not guilty verdict would prevail.
All right, Michael, get a follow-up. Come on.
See, Roland, that's how smooth I am. I asked two of them together.
All right, fine.
Follow-up.
Well, just making sure. Matt, go ahead.
Okay, I have to ask this. I'm sure everybody wants to know. So you talked about the glove demonstration. Was there a point before then when Johnny Cochran came up with the line and y'all were like, that's going to slay in closing argument? Or was that something off the cuff? Number one, I have to ask. And number two, please tell us what it was like working. I mean, you are one of the legends, but what was it like working with Brother Cochran? Because he's obviously, most of our hero as lawyers, one of our heroes. And I'd love to know what that experience was like, beyond formative, of course.
Surely. The weekend after that glove demonstration, we would gather every Saturday in our conference room. There'd be 12 lawyers, investigators, staff sitting there working together. And there was a speakerphone, and Jerry Ullman, who was then the dean of Santa Clara's Law School, was on the phone. And Jerry Ullman said, hey guys, I got a saying for us. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And we all first paused for a moment, thought about it, and the entire room erupted. Hey, yeah, that's the thing. Hey. It was a moment that I will always remember, and Jerry Ullman was the one that thought of that phrase. Your second question, I was with Johnny Cochran for 12 and a half years. I always enjoyed being the man who whispered into the ear of the man. That was, to me, the seat of power. And I would always tell the lawyers, I don't care what you think, trust his instincts. Because the brother had instincts that were gleaned over doing trials, 3, 4, 5 trials a week as a city attorney for many years. Yep. He had instincts because he knew how things would play. He knew how people would be able to react to things. And as important, he had a remarkable ability, brother. I can't do it. He could be kicking your tail during trial and at a break saunter over to the other side and ask you about your family. How's the wife doing? How's the kid doing? He had that remarkable ability to compartmentalize, and prosecutors, defense lawyers alike loved him some Johnny Cochran. He had that smooth way that was able to impress everyone he was around.
All right, then. Carl Douglas, last question. When you look at all of this coverage and when you look at these conflicted feelings, just your assessment of how there's these multiple versions of who OJ Simpson was and how he is going to be remembered for the rest of eternity.
It's going to be complicated, regrettably, Roland. Hopefully, there will be some remembrance and recognition of how great an athlete he was in the first half of his life. But regrettably, particularly with the advent of social media, he will be most remembered for someone that America thinks got away with murder. That, I think, unfortunately, will be the lasting memory of my former client, OJ Simpson.
Carl Douglas, always a pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Brother, have me back again, please. Always enjoy being with you.
We'll have you back on. Thanks a lot.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.